Hi everybody, and welcome to the newest release of the Eos family software, Eos version 3.3. We've got a lot of exciting features and improvements to show you, including changes to magic sheets and fader displays, additions to how you create, manage, and share fixture profiles, and a whole lot more. But first, let's take a look at the cornerstone feature of Eos 3.3, the ability to break out of a single console and match your system to the growing scale of your productions. This is Eos expansion processing. Hey everybody, welcome to the National Theatre in London. Before we get on with the rest of 3.3, let's go take a look at Eos expansion processing.
I'm Andrew Grant and I'm the Lighting Control Manager at the National Theatre. So the National Theatre comprises of three theatres, the Olivier, the Littleton and the Dorfman Theatre. Our mission is to produce our own theatre. That's what we do, sort of week in, week out. We're producing in the range of 20 to 24 sort of new productions each year. The key for us is to support a lighting designer. They come into production and it is our job to facilitate what they need in order to create the show that they are brought in to create. In order to do that, we're fortunate enough to have recently migrated over to full LED rigs. So we needed to make sure we had a control platform capable of doing that. From 2005, 2006, when the first EOS Classic came out, ETC EOS was the direction for us. And as of today, we have 43 Apex devices in-house. And that varies between Apex 20s, Apex 10, Apex 5, Apex processors, and then expansion processors as well. So expansion processing was always on our roadmap. We knew about it, we were aware that it was coming. So we've been sort of eagerly waiting for sort of the software side to follow on with the hardware which we'd already received.
Eos expansion processing allows you to divide up the workload of large rigs across multiple devices. With expansion processing, you can scale up outputs to pilot massive rigs, add temporary output to your existing system for a single show, or distribute processing loads across large spaces, localizing the processing near the output. Expansion processing is perfect for large theater productions, film and studios, themed entertainment, museums and galleries, multi-venue facilities, and rental inventories. With 3.3, Eos expansion processing is a powerful new tool to help you realize the expansiveness of your creativity.
Every show is getting bigger, every show is getting more complex. What the designers want to create is always more ambitious. We're now in a position where if we go for a bigger show with more pixels, with more cells, we can now do that with expansion processing.
Expansion processing allows you to add more boxes to your system and host more output. Whether you're building the largest show on Broadway, filming the next summer box office hit, or just need a bit of extra control for the LED tape in your annual holiday production. Expansion processing is easy to add to your system, and it is built on Eos's rock-solid multi-console synchronization to keep all portions of the system moving in time. The system uses deterministic architecture and full tracking backups, placing reliability and predictability at the core of sessions of any scale.
It gives us the ability also to put our boxes or put EOS expansion process, Apex processors into rooms where they're safe, where they're secure, where we can access them during a show should something go wrong. As lighting programmers, as lighting control technicians, we are now thinking a lot more beyond being able to program a show. We are now considering more and more about what's coming out the back of the console and then into the rig and keeping that running. So the ability to be able to control these rigs, the ability to be able to program shows within the tight schedules that we have is paramount, and EOS gives us that. Let's take a look at adding EOS expansion processors into our session. I'm going to go into Setup, and there is a new tab in 3.3, which is Processors. So when I go in there, you can see that I have a couple of settings for processing and a table of all the processors that are in my session. The first thing I'll need to do is enable expansion processing. So with expansion processing enabled, I'm able to add multiple devices to my session and then assign universes to them to be output from those devices. If my session is going to exceed 75K of output, I'll want to click on my Exceed 75K output.
This is only available on Apex hosted sessions. There are a couple of ways to add a processor to the session. I can either type a processor number. So if I type 1, enter, that'll add a new processor slot, but you can see that the status is unassigned. So I can touch or click in that status area, and I'll get a drop-down that shows me all of the processors that have been added to my session. And I can touch on one of those, hit apply, and now that binds that processor slot to that physical hardware. The other way I can add processors to my session is to use the drop-down above. So again, this will show me all of the processors that are in my session, but that are unassigned. I can select a processor, hit add processor, and that's just going to add that device to the lowest number processor slot. I'm just going to go ahead and add the rest of those into my session. And you can see that even though my processors are added to my session, my host is still outputting all of my universes. So I can start assigning universes to each of my processors. So with my processor 1 selected, I can select output universes 1 through 5, enter, and as soon as I hit enter, those universes have moved over to processor 1 and are now being output from that device. If I want to assign a processor to be a backup, I can simply say processor 1, backup processor 2, enter, and that's going to take my number 2 processor and allow it to start tracking and backing up my first processor. You'll notice that all of my same parameters, the output universes, are carried through to that backup device. And now if processor 1 fails, processor 2 will take over in our standard backup configurations. I'm going to go ahead and next down to processor 3, and I'm going to go ahead and assign universes 101 and 201 through 202. And for extra safety, I'll say processor 3, backup processor 4, and now I have a fully backed up system. There's an additional setting which is called default processor for new universes. In patch, if I patch a universe that hasn't been assigned to a processor, I want to know where it's going to be processed. By default, we allow you to process those new universes on the host. However, you can decide that you want any of those processors to pick up any previously unassigned universes. Now that all my universes are assigned, I can go back out into live and start programming my show just like I would on a single console session. The Fader tab has been modernized with many improvements to configuration and usability. Also, faders in Magic Sheets and in Show Control now include additional features. Let's take a look. So let's open up the Fader tab first. I'm going to close that down and add a new Fader tab. The first thing you'll see is that we have new and refreshed graphics. So this just feels more modern, fits into the rest of how Eos looks and feels, which is a great improvement. The other thing we've added is the ability to use your multi-touch screen to control more than a single fader at a time. So with multi-touch, it's really easy to control more than a single fader. We've also given you a lot more configuration options. So in your gear config area, you'll see we have a lot of tools that are similar to the direct select tab. So you can select the number of fader banks that you want. You can decide whether your fader display is the small version, the large version, or hidden completely. Put that back to small. As previously, we allow you to show the main fader pair, but you can decide whether that shows up on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of your banks. You also have the ability to show and hide all of the individual control elements. So nudge buttons are useful if you're on a single touch display. If the fader ticks are a little too busy, you can hide those. And we can also get down to just single buttons if we want. So if you need something that's more akin to just a page of bumps, that allows you to hide those things. I'll bring those elements back for now. And there's a bunch of configuration for your control buttons. So you can decide which position you want your control buttons on. You can use the page arrows or not. We have added sentry buttons similar to those in direct selects. And you can decide how many page buttons you want to be able to jump to. So all the way from 5, which was in the traditional fader tab, just down to 0, which only shows you those arrow buttons, and anywhere in between. Just like other tabs where you can customize the layouts, we have the ability to reset to the tab default, set the current tab layout as the default for other fader tabs, or reset everything back to EOS default. So those are useful tools as well. Another area where we've brought improvement to the faders is in magic sheets. So I want to just go ahead and add a new magic sheet. And when I bring in my fader object, you'll notice that I'm using the new graphic style. We allow you to keep the new graphic style or go back to the classic. So if you prefer those, you can choose whichever you like. Go back to modern for now. And just like in my fader tab, I now have the ability to set all of those individual components. So if I want to hide the status information completely, maybe I just want to show a single bottom bump button, I can certainly do that. So however I want to set those up, I can do, if I need to bring back all the elements easily, I can just hit the reset button and that'll bring me back to my basic configuration. So I'll close out a magic sheet editor. The other area where we've brought improvements is the ability to control a fader from an external show control source. I'm just going to go into my show control tab real quick. In previous versions, we allowed you to control a sub via an external source, such as an analog input or an ACN address on your network. With 3.3, we're allowing you to control a fader, which means that anything that's mapped to that fader can now be controlled by an external source. So I'm going to look at my second list, which is a network list, and I'm going to go ahead and add event 1. I want my input to be streaming ACN, let's say universe 2/1. And as soon as we get that in there, you'll see that we see the source and the level that's currently coming in via ACN, which is great. And to get my fader associated with that ACN level, I want to edit my action. So I'll say action, and I want that to be fader 10/1. And that's going to be the first fader on page 10. Whatever's mapped to that will now be controlled as universe to address 1 moves. By default, if I hit enter, this will affect the bump of that fader, but I actually want it to drive the fader level. So I'm going to go ahead and append fader to that. And what you'll see is my action for that ACN address is now tied to fader 1 on page 10. When you're creating or editing magic sheets, working faster means you can get more done. We've focused on creation and editing usability in 3.3, bringing changes and new tools that save you time at every click. So let's go ahead and open up our editor. One of the first things you'll notice is that we've moved to an always-on toolbar. So this allows you to see all of your tools on the surface, including your numbering bar. So that just prevents you from mousing in and having to click through a bunch of layers to get to the tools that you use more frequently. One of the other things that's been added is a context menu for quick tools. So I'm just going to grab a beam palette and drag that in. And either using my right mouse click or pressing and holding on a touchscreen, what I get is a context pop-up. And this just shows me all the tools that I frequently used. So cut and copy, paste, renumbering, grouping and ungrouping, those sorts of tools. You'll also notice that there's a new paste tool. So by default, previous to 3.3, when you would paste objects in magic sheets, they would renumber themselves automatically. In 3.3, we've changed that default behavior. So a Control V or a Command V on your Mac will paste the exact same numbering scheme as all of the items you've copied without having to group them first. And because we wanted the same previous behavior to be available, there's a new paste renumber tool, and that will allow you to paste objects and renumber them automatically. So let's take a look at the two examples. I'm going to go ahead and copy that first, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste duplicate. And what you'll see is that my numbering stays at 1, which is what I wanted. If I paste renumber, it will use all of the information that's up in my numeric bar, just like it did previously. Again, now that this is on the surface, you'll have a bit more transparency as to what's going to happen when you paste renumber. I'm going to go to beam palette number 2 on my paste renumber. At any time, if you want to paste renumber in a different increment, just like before, you can always come up here and set your increment, and my next paste renumber will use the information to hit that target. There's one more renumbering tool in the quick context menu, which is renumber in item. So if I go ahead and click that, what I actually get is a pop-up that allows me to just say, I actually want that to be 102, and away I go. The other thing that you'll notice in the context menu is our command line shortcuts. So most of the tools in Magic Sheets now have keyboard shortcuts for your alphanumeric keyboard. This allows you to use your keypad to more quickly edit and change things in Magic Sheets. The point of all these tools is to shave time off as you create and edit Magic Sheets, just making you a little bit faster every time you're in the editor. The other improvement that comes with 3.3 is when I paste multiple objects, it will now remember the offset between the objects. So for example, I have beam palette 1 and 1, I have beam palette 2, and then I have 100 jump up to 102. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those. And if I paste them as duplicate, it's going to remember that offset between them. If I go to paste them as renumber, you'll notice that my numbering tool says the next palette is going to be set to 2. So paste renumber allows me to get beam palette 2, 3, and then 100 jump up to 103. It's really useful when you have channels or palettes that have offsets between the objects, but it's also useful when you have channels with cells, and some of those cells need to be skipped when you copy and paste. Another minor improvement is the addition of the new timecode widget. So just like the top bar widget that we introduced in previous EOS versions, you can now have a much more graphical representation of your show control source and layer on any number of sources that you want to keep track of independently in a Magic Sheet. And don't forget that we had some improvements in 3.2.10 and 3.2.11 as well. So I'm going to go ahead and show that off right now. Just to remind you of those, we added a mirror tool. And so if I select a bunch of objects and click mirror, I'll get into this audition space where I can drag and draw a line, and that will allow me to mirror along that axis wherever I want those to be. If I have that object selected, I can also use my line to move those left and right. And of course, while I'm in this area, if I have text or field positions that are off center, I can decide to mirror those or not. And from this area, I can decide to keep that mirror or cancel the mirror, and away you go. The other improvement is the flip tool. So if I just want to flip things, we do the same audition sequence, which allows you to horizontally or vertically flip the objects, flip the text position in the target fields, and either accept or cancel that flip. The other improvement in 3.2.11 was the ability to use parameters as fields. I'm going to go ahead and bring a channel in here. And instead of status, I can select either any of my focus, color, beam, shutter, image, form categories, or I can select parameter. When I select parameter, I get my parameter pop-up list, and I can either drill down or search any of the parameters for that fixture that I want to use. So now my blue parameter will show its values in that position in that object. And the final improvement that was added in 3.2.10 is a proportional stretch tool. So previously, whenever I stretched an object, it would keep the font sizes the same no matter how large or small my object got. What we now give you is a new tool, which is stretch. And anytime you are stretching an object with that tool selected, we'll scale the font to match the scale of the object. With EOS now outputting from multiple sources on a network, syncing pixel map media and playback across devices is more important than ever. Let's take a look at some sync improvements for pixel mapping. If you use pixel mapping in multi-console systems, you're probably aware that we render all of the content locally. And now that we'll be outputting from multiple devices because of EOS expansion processing, we wanted to make sure it was easier to synchronize your libraries and resync the playback as devices come on and offline. So first, let's look at synchronizing your pixel map media. I'm going to go into my setup area, and I'll go into session, and you'll see a new tool which is push pixel media archive from host to all connected devices. What this is going to do is take the files that are in my pixel media archive and push them to every other device from my host. Just be really cautious when you initiate this. It will overwrite every other file on every other device that's connected to the host, including Nomad devices. So if you have files you want to save and preserve, make sure to copy those out of the archive before initiating. The other thing to consider is that this will use a lot of network bandwidth while it's synchronizing all the media files. When you hit start, we give you a little warning to recommend you not do this during a performance. And if you're in a safe place, go ahead and hit continue, and that will begin to synchronize all of the files from the host out to all of the other devices. With the standard media set, usually takes about a minute, but as you add more media, that time will increase. Don't forget to run this every time you add custom media to your pixel map archive. Another improvement is that we will resync our pixel map playback to the host every time a client device joins the session. This will ensure that expansion processing devices can play their media back synchronized with each other and the host, and will also ensure that client devices show the media where it's playing in the file and not just starting it from the beginning. Another improvement we've brought to 3.3 is the ability to change color parameters from a linear curve to a quadratic curve. And what does this mean? Eos has assumed that all color parameters are linear. And what that means is that when Eos is telling green to be at 50%, we're assuming that green is outputting from the fixture at 50% of its potential brightness. Same with 25 and 25, 75 and 75, and so on. So we think that the output is matched linearly to the brightness. So if we think about our curves in other areas of the desk, what's happening is we have an expectation of linear output, but the fixture isn't actually outputting in a linear fashion. It may be less bright at the beginning of its fade in order to make a nice smooth fade curve, and then gradually increase with brightness as it outputs. So the result in this is that your color picker may look different than the output of your fixture. When we have nonlinear curves in the fixture and linear output from the desk, Eos is expecting to send data to all of those emitters to set them to a certain level to mix to a certain color. And obviously, if the fixture and Eos's output disagree, then the color picker and the output of the channel are not going to match. So the tool that we've added in our color configuration area allows us to change a different curve to match that of the fixture. So I'm going to go in and find my generic LED RGBA fixture. And in my color configuration area, I can open that up and you'll see the new drop down here that says, what is the fixture using for curvature to be controlled? So if I select quadratic, that will allow Eos to understand to send a different curve of data to the fixture. I hit apply, and don't forget that I want to save that fixture profile. So what I've done here is I've made a change to the fixture profile, and this is important because this will affect anything that's already been recorded in the show. So this is something that you want to make a decision about at the beginning of your process, as opposed to once you already have a bunch of color palettes and cues already recorded. This has the potential to change your data throughout your show file, just like other parts of editing your fixture. We've also made some improvements to the Fixture Editor and imports in general. Eos now understands a larger multitude of GDTF parameters, and we're going to continue to improve that import route as we continue software development. We've also done a lot of behind-the-scenes work to ensure that the libraries that we bundle with Eos are now forwards and backwards compatible. So that means that any fixture profile that's generated in 3.3 or later will be able to move to any show file from 3.3 or later. So if you have a fixture profile that comes up in 3.5 in the future, you'll be able to bring that fixture profile back to 3.3 and Eos will understand it. Additionally, to help you manage your fixture profiles, the editor list now indicates where each profile originated from. So you can see that we have our bundled library called out, and we have the ability to see our fixtures that have been imported via GDTF. And in addition to all those changes, the editor itself has received lots of cleanup. So areas where you would run into numbers not working or having difficulties with ranges, we've done a lot of cleanup in the editor to make sure managing fixtures is easier than ever. In EOS 3.3, we spent a lot of time building tools that help make fixture profiles easier. If you need to create a profile from scratch, the new Fixture Wizard allows you a quick and easy way to build and create a profile. For fixture editing and complicated management, we've brought usability improvements into the existing Fixture Editor. A challenge with fixture profiles has always been bringing in a brand new fixture. The editor is capable, but there's a lot of complexity in building out a single fixture. So in 3.3, we've introduced the Eos Fixture Wizard. This allows you to take your DMX table, answer a few questions, and get Eos to build a simplified fixture definition for you. So let's take a look. Just like before, if I want to add a new fixture profile, I can hit the plus at the bottom of my list, And instead of just creating an empty fixture in the editor, it will allow me to make some choices. And this wizard will step me through and help me answer questions about my fixture. So if I want to go the old route, or I have a really complicated fixture, I can still create the empty fixture in the editor. But for today, I'm going to go ahead and start with a moving fixture. I'm not going to take you through this whole thing, but I want you to see what sort of questions the wizard asks. As you can see, if I go down the moving light, I can choose what type of moving light I'm creating. So is it a spot? Is it a scanner? Is it a wash? Does it have cells or pixels? That will let me define some of the questions that need answering for me to create a fixture profile. So let's go ahead and choose moving head spot. The next question we ask is whether the device is additive or subtractive. If you have custom color or other systems, you can always choose that and define those individually. So today we're going to start with subtractive color mixing. And then the Fixture Wizard also wants to know what sorts of additional parameters the fixture has. Again, this will help us set up questions for you to answer and fill out in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you color wheels, gobo wheels, and framing shutters for today. And then we have our device information page. So of course we want to name our fixture. And when I get started, it'll start taking me through questions about my device. So in this example, I want to use information about pan and tilt. And if I'm using 16-bit parameters, which most pan and tilt parameters use, you'll notice that it autofills the DMX channel for me. If I have other addresses, I can drop down and select those. So the other area I can define are my user minimum and maximums for these parameters. Pan and tilt display in degrees in Eos. So this pan is going to be negative 270 degrees at its full extreme, all the way up to positive 270 degrees at the top. Your data sheet will tell you this information and you can fill it out to match. So let's move on to color mixing. As you can see, because we selected a subtractive color mixing system, it defaults me to CMY. I can use those as 16-bit or 8-bit. And if I have something like a color temperature flag, I can add that as well. Because I chose a color wheel, I can come in and define those parameters. The first question the wizard will ask you is how many slots the color wheel has. And this is excluding open, right? So if it's a 5-slot wheel and we have 4 that are colors and 1 open, we want to put 4 in here. And that gives us the ability to come in and select any of these standard colors. So if you have something that is a dark green, but you don't know precisely which green it is, you can select that. If you hit other, that will allow you to go in and select specific colors. But for today, dark green will do great. And I can fill in the rest of my colors here. You'll also notice that I have the ability to select spin positive and spin negative. So if those parameters are a part of your color wheel, you can certainly select those here. Once I've assigned my wheel, I can use the color select to assign it to a DMX channel. And then if I have additional ranges between open and my individual colors, I can define those ranges here. Gobo wheels are built similarly. So I choose a number of slots, excluding my open, and that gives me the ability to, again, select just some basic gobos. They don't have to match exactly if you don't want them, if you're just moving quickly, or hitting other will take you into the full gobo library. But really quickly, I can get a pretty good approximation of the types of gobos that maybe standard fixtures have. Similar to my color wheel, I can use the gobo select to add those to a DMX channel, and then I can fill out all of the ranges as they're shown in my documentation. Again, if the gobo wheel has the capability to index, you can add that, and that will allow you to define not just your DMX channel, but any of the rotate ranges that your manual tells you about. Finally, I can look at adding some framing shutters. So framing shutters come in different variants in different fixture types. This will allow me to decide whether I'm using a full framing shutter or whether the shutters only come halfway through the frame. And also whether the motors that control the shutters are with thrust and angle or using AB. And this just needs to match whatever your manual for your fixture says. Once I've got those selected, I can use a frame assembly if the fixture has it, and again, define my ranges for my minimum and my maximum. And then I can add my individual framing shutters. If I'm using 16-bit, I can define that, and as I add my framing shutters, it's going to go ahead and include those DMX channels automatically. Of course, I can go in and customize those as I need them. If your fixture uses a DMX-controlled intensity channel, you can come in and add that, define its channel, and if it's a 16-bit device, you can add that as well. And in form, we have a bunch of other options that common fixtures come with. So if you have shutter strobe, you can not just add the channel, but you can add ranges to allow you to define close, strobe, random, things that are generally associated with strobe. You also have the ability to define zoom and your angle minimum and maximum. Similarly, we allow you to define iris, edge, and diffusion. Once you've answered all the questions to match your fixture's documentation, you can go review that fixture. And this will tell you that the fixture you've created has a DMX footprint of 34. There may have been some parameters that we didn't get asked a question about, or there may be additional parameters on the end of the fixture. So you can always come in and change your footprint, and by clicking on any parameter that's undefined, we allow you to select parameters from the list. So that can be searched and added that way. Once you're confident that your fixture matches your documentation, you can hit finalize, and it'll allow you to save this fixture and exit the wizard. From here, if you have more complicated changes or dependent parameters or need to add more parameters, you can do that through the standard Fixture Editor. If you're interested in more information on using these advanced features, be sure to check out our manual. We know that not all fixtures are the same brightness, and in Eos 3.3, we've added lumens to fixture profiles and to patch, which give you a bit of extra realism to your augmented model. Lumens is a property of a fixture profile, so if we go into patch and we look at fixtures, we grab one of our channels and we go into physical data, we can see that we have lumens that are associated with every profile that gets patched. If your profile doesn't have lumens predefined, Eos will default to 10,000 lumens. That is the equivalent of a 575 watt HPL lamp. And like many properties that are in a fixture profile, we can also override this on a per channel basis. So if I go back into patch, grab a channel, and I want to override the lumens for just that channel, I can use lumens on my command line, set that to 25,000, and that will show up as over double the brightness in augmented. Another useful tool that was added in the augmented area of patch is the ability to use offset when you're setting positions so that you can evenly distribute them. So for this example, I'll say channels 1001 through 1005, and I want to take their position, and I'm just going to change the X. So we'll say a position of 20 feet, and I can use offset to say 5, and now you'll notice that that adds those positions starting with channel 1001 at position X20, and then every 5 feet adding fixtures. So if you're stringing fixtures down a pipe or in a line, using that is a faster way to get those values in. A few other minor improvements that you'll notice. Our dimmer default color temperature has changed from 5000 Kelvin to 3050, and that just warms it up to feel a little bit more natural. We also have the materials dock always open at launch now, so if you need to access materials, it will be in the same dock area as your asset library. And you'll notice some improvements in the object selection outline, specifically at non-standard monitor resolutions and when the camera was coming in at odd angles. And don't forget, in 3.2.10, we added touch gestures for the augmented camera, so you can use your multi-touch touchscreen to pan, zoom, and move your camera around. Let's look at the About window, which has had some nice improvements. About's now broken up into several tabs, similar to other areas in the space, where you can get information about your device, the session as a whole, processors, and what's new. Similar to previous EOS versions, About device gives you all the information about the local device that you're sitting on. If you look at session, you can see all of the ACN devices that are connected to your console. What's New presents a QR code which will link you to our online manual, And like previous, touching the What's New in the manual will bring up tab 100 to show you the manual in the console. Processors is a new tab which shows you all of the health cards of your connected host and processors and allows you to make sure everything's running healthy. If you want a larger view of this screen, don't forget that About can be opened up in a tab, and that Processors tab is available to see more devices at the same time. These health cards have two sides. This is the summary side, which gives you an idea of what each device is doing and what it's assigned for. But if troubleshooting is necessary, all of the devices in the system now report their health to every other device, so you can monitor things like remote processors from any place in the session. So we're going to go ahead and close that and look at About in our CIA again. In addition to health changes, we've also added some new tools for managing groups. So if I say group 101 through 105, if I'm looking at About, in our current values tab, we've always showed you a current channel, but if you had multiple groups selected, you were only able to see a single value. There's a new About Group tab when channels are selected, and that shows you all of the groups and their channel selections, so you can have a view of what's happening through the whole selection. Because systems are scaling exponentially with the addition of EOS expansion processing, we wanted to make sure that health and reporting were at the center of every multi-console experience. We did a lot of work making sure devices could report their health session-wide so that you could monitor devices regardless of where you are in the session, and that any ailing device would report itself so that you can take action. You'll notice we have updated health graphics near the command line on all of our devices. Health graphics are now separated by session health as well as device health, so we can report whether the device is having issues or whether the session is struggling staying connected. We report these issues with a traffic light system. If the session is green, that means that everything's okay and all devices are healthy. If the session is yellow, that means the system is unstable, but we won't expect an audience to notice. For example, if a backup is taken over, data is still getting out to the fixtures, but the system isn't considered to be in a healthy state. If the system is in a red light state, that means we expect an audience to notice issues with the system. Either processor pairs have gone offline, a device is performing poorly with the tasks that it's been sent, or a primary host or backup has gone offline. All of these issues will report into the health status bar next to the command line, as well as in the health cards found in the About display. A final addition to health: sometimes with very large tasks, EOS will pause the graphics refresh in order to ensure that the task can be completed with speed. Sometimes that can look like the console has hung. You'll see a new working bar show up in the monitor above your CIA, and that will assure you that EOS is still functioning, but is just busy with the task at hand. EOS family systems and lighting control systems in general continue to grow more complex. As such, we need better and more precise networking in order to facilitate that communication between devices. With EOS 3.3, we've added a comprehensive guide to the networking requirements in the EOS 3.3 manual, and we'll be adding additional educational resources to our website and learning stage in the coming months. If you need more information on networking, check out the EOS manual and our upcoming educational offerings. In addition to all the great features we've covered, the team has been very busy adding fixes and improvements throughout EOS. To help you stay organized, we've increased the target number count for groups, subs, and queue lists. You can now number those up to 9,999. Additionally, we have increased channel counts up to 100,000 channels and 150,000 addresses patched. Remote startup and shutdown settings have been moved from the shell into EOS settings. The in-console and web manual now contains a revised OSC section, release notes, and additional changes. In the shell, you can select a boot up mode instead of just last used. When you're storing pan and tilt in XYZ values, we've made some changes to the underlying math to prevent unwanted flips. If you use CIE X and Y to input color information, EOS now permits 4 decimal places for that color input. If your LED fixture has UV emitters, we now home those emitters to 0 unless you change that in the fixture profile. The Apex processor has improved displays and control on the front rack mount touchscreen. In addition to all those great features, EOS 3.3 contains over 600 bug fixes, minor improvements, and syntax extensions to keep you focused on lighting the show. Thanks so much for joining. We are very excited to bring you new features like Eos expansion processing, improved faders and magic sheets, better fixture profile creation, editing, and so much more. Be sure to check out etcconnect.com/EOS for downloads, including software, release notes, and the updated manual with information on all these great changes and improvements. For me and the entire crew here at ETC Studios, this is Nick Gonsman signing off. See you at the next one.